Memorial Cemetery. That's where our founder is buried. Picture of his grave, Lyman Dayton, is over here on the wall. Then we have Hartfreeville, which as far as I know is owned by the town of Dayton, and they are responsible for its maintenance, and it's quite a, it is definitely taking in fresh burials. And then we come to the one that surprised me most of all, Crystal Lake Cemetery. It was founded in 1855, and I drove through it one day just to say, okay, I've been here and I've got the address now. And I saw a Rebel Confederate States flag fly, and I thought, oh my goodness, now either we got big problems here or we have a true Civil War veteran from the South here. And that was the case. He was with the 18th Mississippi. And later, on another trip, I saw other Barringtons buried there, and I thought, okay, what's the deal? And Fred is going to tell me more about that story later, I hope. The Barringtons and their Civil War, brother against brother, or cousin against cousin, whatever it was going on. So that's what I know about the cemeteries. Pleasant places. I love cemeteries.
The town of Dayton, 165 years. You think back 165 years ago, there wasn't much in this area. This was commonly known as the Indian land. And the Indians, particularly the Menominee Indians, controlled everything that was here in central Wisconsin and most of what was in northern Wisconsin as well. So the Menominees were really the dominant tribe in this general area. Settlement occurred here, many of you know, after 1848 when Wisconsin became a state. There was simultaneously with that date an agreement that was entered into by the federal government with the Menominee tribe, which was called the Menominee Treaty, sometimes called the Menominee Purchase, various names that have been applied to it. But basically what happened was the federal government entered into an agreement with the Menominee tribe, and I'm talking about the Menominee tribe largely now because there were sub-tribes of the Menominees as well. But in that agreement, there are 8 counties in this area, including Waupaca County, that were essentially purchased from the Indians. The agreement was that the federal government would pay the Indians $350,000, which was a princely sum of money in those days. I don't know what the conversion would render it to be today, but you could apply the math and figure it out, I'm sure, and it would be a pretty good sum of money. But in addition to that, they were also offering 600,000 acres of land in Minnesota that the Indians could then have as their own reservation. This later came to be known as the Crow Wing Reservation, and they entered into this agreement with Chief Oshkosh. He was the primary representative of the Menominees at the time, and Chief Oshkosh wasn't exactly sure what kind of land they were really getting, so he decided to take a trip over to Minnesota and see what this land really was. It's a long trek over there, but when he came back, he told some of his sub-chiefs, one of whom presumably was Chief Waupaca, and he said, that is a land to die in, not a land to live in. So he was disappointed with the agreement that he had with the federal government, and he wanted to renegotiate that agreement. It's a tribute to, I think, to the settlers who had come into this area, that by that time they had established a good relationship with the Menominees, and the white settlers in the Wolf River area, Fox River Valley area, collectively signed a petition and urged the federal government to allow the Indians to stay in Wisconsin. So it was a cooperative thing between the Menominees who wanted to stay and the white settlers who didn't want them to leave. They had a good relationship. So then that resulted in the end in what we've known more commonly today as the Menominee Reservation in northern Wisconsin.
International Order of Good Templars, which was the group that formed Camp Cleghorn and set it up as the Good Templar Training School. It was a temperance organization but besides temperance, they were way ahead of their time as far as I'm concerned, a very progressive group. They believed in equality between men and women. They believed in, they were concerned about the lives and welfare of children, very family oriented. The camps were summer camps for families. They believed in brotherhood and peace and international harmony and, you know, the unbiased, no racial discrimination. This was back in the 1800s. It was a pretty neat group. Anyway, Camp Cleghorn started with a purchase of the land from a Dayton resident and landowner whose name was Dake, R.P. Dake. He was a prominent man in Dayton Township. The land is on Columbia Lake, and it was a perfect place for a summer camp. So it got started. We had their first assembly in 1998. And then there was a progression. People started out camping in tents, then pretty soon little lots were set out in the property, and people leased those lots. And some of them, and my grandparents lived in a tent while they were building the cottage. People lived in tents, then they built fishing shacks, then they became cottages, then they became, you know, summer homes, then since the sewers went in 75, many of them have become permanent year-round homes. Anyway, and mine did too, although I still don't have a basement.
Let's see, James Hinchman Jones is responsible for the name rural. He referred to his land that he owned around here as his rural holdings, and for some reason they adopted it as the name of the village. So it's been rural ever since. But he built an inn, or as a tavern as it was called then, where the halfway house, that's what the halfway house is. And that's where my grandfather was born. Yeah, in 1853, because they'd gotten there and they hadn't had time to build a house, so he was born there. And it was, he was always referred to as the first white child born in the village. In other words, the first on European descent who was born in the village, because I'm sure there were other Indians who were born here long before that. So they've lived there ever since. Unfortunately, some people have taken over the farm and done a real nice job. And I'm very pleased with that. But one of the first things that they did was they built a school and they built a church, a Presbyterian church, because they were mostly Scottish Presbyterians. And they also, but the Presbyterian church closed in the late 1928, 29. And then the school was moved down onto Main Street, where the building, well, both buildings still stand. And there were some young men from rural that went and fought in the Civil War. And there were a lot of them who went and fought in World War II. There were 2 families in rural during World War II, when I was a kid, that each had 3 young men in the Second World War. So there were lots of veterans of World War II in rural, including my brother. Early on, they really wanted to progress, and they wanted to become, in fact, bigger than Waupaca. Mm-hmm. For one thing, they were hoping that the railroad was going to come through rural. I think, fortunately for what we have now in rural, it didn't come. I think we're much better off with what we have at the present.
We had a wonderful time. We got to know rural. Our neighbors, you know, Lois and Butch bought the Potts home in 1987 and turned it into a bed and breakfast, and Lois started working on the historical aspect of it. And she got the inn, well, the house, what became an inn, and the farm, and the whole little village. They got it on the National Historic Registry. And so people come to rural because they appreciate history, and they love staying at the inn because we have tried to keep it as much as possible like it was. It's a family home, it's a place of charm, a place in nature that we love. And the Crystal River going by, everybody comes there and they say, as soon as I step on the property, I feel this relax. You know, and people who come from the city, we need this for our well-being. And just like the poem that Helen read, we need places of respite. And